If you are listening to this, I want you close enough to hear the tremble I am trying to hide, because this is the part of my story where everything still looks like a choice, and I still believe I can keep my hands clean. Before I begin, tell me something in the comments. If someone promised you freedom, but only if you betrayed what you were born to protect, what would you do? And if you want the next part, subscribe so you do not miss it. Because what I discovered in the palace after that question changed the way I looked at love, loyalty, and power forever. My name is Serelya of the Silverwood Court. I am an elf, and I have lived long enough to learn that cages do not always have bars. Sometimes a cage is a silk room with soft lantern light. Sometimes a cage is a crown you never asked for, placed on your future like a hand you cannot pry away. The day he offered me freedom, the palace was dressed for celebration. Moon-glass windows held the late sun like honey. Courtiers drifted through the corridors like carefully placed flowers, all smiles that never reached their eyes. The air smelled of polished cedar and sweet wine, and the faint bite of old magic that clung to the stones. Everyone kept glancing toward the inner gardens, where the crown roots grew, ancient trees braided together, their living arches rising like a cathedral made by the forest itself. I was supposed to be honored. That was the word they used. Honored guest, blessed vessel, chosen light. But none of those words could hide the truth. I could not leave, not without permission, not without consequence. Because inside my chest, beneath my ribs, something sang when the world was wounded. It was not a song I learned. It was a song that happened to me. When drought tightened the earth, my palms warmed and the soil softened. When a sapling bent too far, my breath steadied, and the fibers remembered how to stand. I could knit what was fraying, coax growth where nothing should grow, call calm where panic spread like smoke. The court called it Dawnweaving. The king called it a gift from the realm, and I called it the reason my footsteps always returned to the same polished halls. I first noticed him because he did not behave like everyone else. Where the others bowed too deep, he only inclined his head. Where the others spoke in layers of meaning, he used plain words. He stood near a column carved with vines, half in shadow, as if he had chosen the edge of the room on purpose. His cloak was a traveling cloak, not court finery, and he carried the kind of stillness that did not ask permission to exist. When our eyes met, I expected him to look away. Instead, he looked at me as if I were a person and not a rumor. He waited until the music shifted and the crowd moved, then stepped closer, careful not to startle me, close enough that I could hear his voice without anyone else hearing it. "Serelya," he said softly. "Not my title, not my honor name. My name." My skin tightened. Only a handful of people were allowed to speak it without ceremony. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my smile in place. In the palace, smiles were shields. He glanced toward the dais at the far end of the hall, where King Aurelian sat as still as a statue of himself, silver gold hair pinned with a thin circlet of living ivy. Aurelian was beautiful in the way storms were beautiful, distant and inevitable. His gaze drifted over the celebration like a net. The stranger spoke again. "Rowan, that is the name I am using here." "Using?" I repeated, my pulse quickening. He gave me the smallest, almost amused exhale. "You know what it is to be named by other people." It was the first time someone had said anything like that to me, and it landed like a hand on a locked door. "Why are you here, Rowan?" I asked. "To offer you what no one in this hall will offer you," he said. "A way out." My throat went dry. A way out was the kind of phrase that could get a person quietly removed from court and politely forgotten. "Freedom," he continued, tasting the word as if it mattered. Not a holiday beyond the gates. Not a supervised visit to the river markets. Real freedom. You leave. You do not return. You choose your own mornings. My fingers curled against the fabric of my gown. My heart tried to climb into my mouth. "You cannot say that to me," I whispered. "I can, and I am," he replied. "But I am not a fool. Nothing in the palace is given without payment. Not even air." I held his gaze, because if I looked away, I might shatter. "What is your price?" Rowan's eyes did not flicker. "You give me something the king keeps hidden. Something he is using to keep you here." My breath caught. The court had 100 secrets, and I had been raised among them, taught how to step around the sharpest ones. But he was not asking for gossip or scandal. He was asking for a lever. "What is it?" I asked. "A truth," he said. "About the Dawnweaving. About what it cost you. About what the king intends to do with it at the Binding of Dawn." My stomach turned. The Binding of Dawn was an old rite, spoken of in hymns and history. Every few decades, the realm's wards were renewed, threads of protection woven through the borders, so the wild magic beyond would not seep in and twist what grew. It was always presented as a celebration, a renewal, a blessing. But for the first time, I wondered why the king watched me like a man watching a door that might open. I kept my voice steady. "You want me to betray him." Rowan did not deny it. I want you to survive him." Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they made something cold slide through my ribs, because the danger was not only the king. The danger was how quickly I wanted to believe Rowan. "I am not his enemy," I said, though the sentence sounded rehearsed, like something I had been taught. Rowan's gaze softened, just slightly. "No, you are his instrument, and instruments do not get to decide when the music ends." A laugh rose in my chest, sharp and bitter, but I swallowed it down. "You do not know what you are asking," I told him. "I know enough," he said. "Enough to know the king's interest in you is not kindness. Enough to know the court's praise is a ribbon tied around a lock. Enough to know you have been taught to call your prison a purpose. For a heartbeat." The hall seemed to tilt. Lantern light blurred. The music sounded too far away. Then a bell chimed, clear and commanding, and the room obeyed it without thinking. Conversations softened. Smiles tightened. A messenger in pale green approached, bowed, and spoke my name like a sentence. "Lady Serelya, His Majesty requests your presence in the Hall of Crown Roots." Now. The words now were never optional. I looked toward King Aurelian, and he was already watching me. Not with anger, not with impatience, with ownership dressed as devotion. Rowan's voice fell to a whisper. "He knows I spoke to you." I did not move. My feet felt rooted to the floor. Rowan's hand brushed mine, barely a touch, like a leaf landing on water. In my palm, something cool appeared, pressed into my skin. A small token, smooth as river stone, carved with a simple mark. "If you choose freedom," he murmured, "you will find me where the palace shadows end and the forest begins. Bring the truth, bring what he is hiding. And Serelya, do not let him convince you that your power belongs to him." Then he stepped back into the crowd, and the court swallowed him like he had never existed. I stared at the token in my hand, a key or a trap, and with King Aurelian's gaze burning into me from across the hall, I walked toward the Hall of Crown Roots, knowing that the next door I opened might not be mine to close. Because the worst part was this: as terrified as I was of the king wanting my power, I was even more terrified of how much I wanted to believe Rowan's promise, and I could not tell which fear would ruin me first. The Hall of Crown Roots was not built so much as persuaded into existence. The trees had been guided, not cut, their trunks woven into pillars that still pulsed with slow life. Veins of pale sap glimmered under, the bark like moonlit rivers. Above, the canopy formed a living dome, and light filtered through leaves that never fully fell, even in the deepest winter. Every time I entered that hall, my skin prickled. It was the kind of place that remembered footsteps, the kind of place that listened. A pair of guards stood at the entrance, their armor shaped like overlapping leaves, polished to a soft sheen. They did not touch me. They never did. But they watched, and the watching was its own hand. I walked alone down the root-arched aisle toward the dais at the center, where King Aurelian waited. He rose as I approached, and for a heartbeat I had the familiar, disorienting thought, he is too beautiful to be real. His hair was the color of frost on new branches. His eyes were the palest green, the shade of early spring when the world is still unsure whether it should thaw. He wore no heavy crown, only a thin circlet of living ivy that curled around his temple as if it had chosen him. The court said the ivy only grew for a true king. I stopped at the proper distance and bowed, controlled, precise. My gown whispered against the floor like a secret. "You were speaking with someone, Serelya," Aurelian said. His voice was calm, not accusing, not asking. My spine held steady through sheer practice. "Many people spoke to me this evening. Your Majesty." "Not like that," he replied. His gaze did not blink, not with the urgency of a trapped bird. My throat tightened, and I reminded myself of something my old tutor once murmured when I was young, and the palace first began closing around me. "Never give them your fear. They will name it, and then they will own it." I kept my face serene. "I do not understand." Aurelian descended the dais, slow, as if he had all the time in the world. The living roots beneath the floor seemed to hush beneath his steps. "Do you know how many songs have been written about you?" he asked. The question landed strangely. I did not answer. He continued, as if I had. "The court loves a miracle. They love a maiden who can make the broken whole. They love the idea that pain can be undone without consequence." His eyes moved over me as if measuring what was inside my skin. "You have become their hope, their comfort." I swallowed. Hope was a weight. Comfort was a chain. Aurelian stopped close enough that I could smell cedar and something sharper, like crushed herbs. It always surprised me how grounded he smelled for someone who seemed carved out of legend. "Tell me his name," he said softly. My heart knocked hard once, then steadied into a slower, tighter rhythm. If I gave Rowan's name, he would become a target. If I lied and was caught, I would become the target. I chose a third path. "Your Majesty," I said, "I do not know what you believe you saw." Aurelian's mouth curved faintly. Not a smile, an acknowledgement. "You are careful," he murmured. "That is one of the reasons I chose you." I did not flinch, but inside me something recoiled, chose, as if I were a lantern he had plucked from a shelf. The hall of crown roots seemed to draw colder. Aurelian's fingers lifted, not touching my face, but close enough that I felt the heat of his hand. The world held its breath. "I do not want you frightened, Serelya," he said. "Fear makes the Dawnweaving erratic, and we cannot afford error." There it was. Not concern for me, concern for what I could do. I kept my voice gentle. "I have never failed the realm." His eyes sharpened. "No, you have not." He turned and began walking, expecting me to follow. I did, because disobedience in the palace was not dramatic. It was quiet, final. We moved deeper into the hall, into a section the public never saw. Here the roots thickened, forming walls. The light dimmed. The air tasted faintly of rain, even though the sky outside was clear. A door appeared where there should not have been one, a seam in the living bark. Aurelian pressed his palm against it. The bark shifted, rippled, and opened. My breath caught. Beyond was a chamber I had never seen, its floor covered in moss that glowed softly underfoot. In the center stood a pool as still as polished stone, water so clear it looked like a window into the earth. And above the pool, suspended in the air, hovered a ring of light, not the warm gold of lanterns. This was pale, sharp, almost colorless, like dawn's first thin edge. It pulsed in time with my heartbeat. My hands went cold. I knew that light, not by sight, but by feeling. It was the same sensation that rose in my chest when I wove life into broken things. "This is the source," Aurelian said, watching me watch it. My mouth barely formed words. Source of what? The king's gaze did not leave my face. The source of dawn, the wellspring from which the wards were first woven, the reason our borders hold, the reason the wild magic beyond cannot consume what we have built. I stared at the ring of light, and it seemed to stare back. I was not sure whether I should kneel or run. Aurelian's voice softened, almost reverent. Long ago, the source was open to the realm, but power like this invites hunger. So it was sealed away, guarded, hidden. He stepped closer to the pool. A hand's breadth above the water, the ring of light trembled. Then he looked at me again. "It has been fading." A dull ache spread through my chest. "Fading?" "Yes," he said. "The realm grows. The demands on the wards grow. The source has been asked for more than it was ever meant to give, and it is thinning." My mouth went dry. "What does that have to do with me?" Aurelian approached until he stood beside me. I could feel his presence like a shadow with a pulse. "The Dawnweaving in you, Serelya, is not merely a gift. It is a link. You can draw from the source. You can feed it back into the wards." My stomach dropped. "Feed it back," I repeated, very softly. His expression was almost tender. "You will stand at the binding of dawn, and you will open yourself. The source will pour through you, and you will weave it into the borders. The realm will be renewed, safe, whole." It sounded like a blessing, but my skin crawled as if it recognized a trap. "And what is the cost?" I asked. Aurelian's eyes held mine. "The cost is yours to bear, as all great gifts require." The chamber seemed to tilt. I had always suspected Dawnweaving took something from me, but no one ever spoke of it. Some days after healing, my bones felt hollow, as if someone had scooped out marrow. Some nights, my dreams were empty, as if my mind had been washed clean and left to dry. I had told myself it was fatigue, normal strain. Now, staring at the source, I realized the truth was bigger and darker. I was not just healing things. I was being used as a conduit for a power that was not mine, drawn through my body like a river forced through a narrow channel. My voice came out thin. "Why did you not tell me?" Aurelian's jaw tightened by the smallest degree. "Because you would have questioned it, and doubt disrupts the weave." I looked away, down at the pool, and the water reflected me. Pale hair pinned back, eyes too wide, lips parted as if I had forgotten how to breathe. A caged miracle. Aurelian's voice lowered. "Serelya, the realm depends on you. The realm," I thought bitterly, "or your reign." As if sensing my thoughts, he stepped closer. His hand finally touched my wrist, gentle, but unmistakably possessive. The contact made the ring of light flicker. "See?" he murmured. "It responds to you. It knows you. It wants you." The words should not have felt wrong, but they did. Aurelian's thumb brushed the inside of my wrist where my pulse beat. "You are mine to protect," he said softly. "Mine to cherish. Mine to guide. Mine." The words struck harder than any shouted command. I forced myself to speak. "Your Majesty, I am not an object." His gaze cooled, like frost spreading. "No," he said. "You are not." He lifted my hand, turning my palm upward, as if presenting me to the source. "You are a key." The ring of light brightened, and something in my chest answered it. A pull so strong it made me sway. My fingers curled without my permission. I snatched my hand back, stumbling one step away. Aurelian watched, unbothered. There is nothing to fear, Serelya. You will not be harmed. Not harmed, I thought. Just emptied. Just consumed slowly, beautifully, in the name of the realm. I pressed my fingertips into my palm and felt the small token Rowan had given me hidden there, hard and cool against my skin. Aurelian's eyes flicked downward, almost imperceptibly. He saw the movement. He did not know what I held, but he knew I held something. His voice stayed calm, but the air sharpened. What is that in your hand? I lifted my gaze. Nothing, Your Majesty. Aurelian's expression did not change, but the roots along the walls seemed to tense, as if listening. He stepped toward me again. Serelya, you have been loyal. Do not let tonight plant weeds in your mind. Weeds, I thought. That was what he called questions. That was what he called choice. I bowed, because it was safer than silence. I live to serve the realm. Aurelian's gaze held me for a long moment. Then he nodded once, satisfied with the shape of my words, even if not their truth. Good, he said. Then you will rest. You will not wander tonight. The binding approaches, and you must be steady. The chamber's door began to close as if the bark was swallowing the secret again. As I followed him out, my pulse raced. Not from awe, but from dread. Rowan wanted the truth the king was hiding, and now I knew at least part of it. The source was fading. The king intended to pour it through me, and whether I called it duty or devotion, the end would be the same if I stayed. I would become an empty vessel dressed as a heroine. When we returned to the bright hall, the celebration had not stopped. Music still laughed, glasses still clinked, smiles still shimmered like polished masks, but everything looked different now. Every lantern seemed like a watching eye. Every corridor seemed narrower, and in the middle of the noise, I felt the first clear, terrifying thought of my life. I have to get out. Not tomorrow, not after the binding, tonight, because if I waited, the choice would be taken from me, and if I ran, I would have to decide whether Rowan's freedom was real, or just another kind of cage. I did not sleep. Back in my chambers, the air felt too still, like the room itself had been instructed to keep me quiet. The curtains were drawn, the lanterns dimmed, and a bowl of winterberries sat on the table as if sweetness could persuade me to accept my life. I walked to the door and tried the handle. It did not move, not locked in the way a common door locks. No keyhole, no latch, just a faint resistance, like the wood had decided it was no longer a passage. My breath came shallow. I pressed my palm against the carved surface and felt the subtle hum of warding magic. Polite, seamless, unquestionable, a cage without bars. I turned and found my reflection in the mirror, pale hair loosened from its pins, eyes too bright. A woman who looked like a blessing and felt like a warning. I opened my hand. The small token Rowan had given me lay in my palm, smooth and cool, a river stone carved with a simple mark. When I focused on it, I felt a faint tug, as if the stone wanted to roll toward some distant place. This is not a trinket, I thought. This is a direction. Footsteps paused outside my door, soft, familiar, the sound of someone standing there without knocking. I swallowed my panic and forced my voice steady. Who is it? A gentle answer, like a lullaby. It is only me, Lady Serelya, your attendant. Her name was Leora. She had been assigned to me for years, always present, always smiling. I had never considered that her kindness might come with instructions. I said nothing. After a moment, her voice returned, still calm. His Majesty wishes you to rest. Please do not trouble yourself with wandering tonight. The palace is unsettled by too much movement before the binding. Unsettled, another pretty word for controlled. I sat on the edge of my bed and waited until her footsteps faded down the corridor. Then I stood, heart hammering, and went to the window. The window opened easily. Of course it did. A cage is always more convincing when it pretends you have choices. Below, the inner gardens spread like a painted dream. Lanterns hung among the branches, their light drifting over ponds and paths and flower beds shaped into spirals. Even at this hour, there were guards at the edges, their leaf armor catching the glow. Not many, just enough. I could have called for help. I almost laughed at the thought. Help from whom? From the people who sang about me while the door sealed shut. I pressed the token between my fingers. The pull strengthened, drawing my hand toward the left side of the garden, toward a line of pale trees that formed a quiet corridor of shadow. The forest begins where the palace shadows end, Rowan had said. I exhaled once, slow. Then I did something I had never done. I climbed out. My feet found the narrow ledge. Cold stone bit through the thin soles of my slippers. For a moment, I swayed, dizzy with the simple fact that I was outside the script written for me. Below, a trellis climbed the wall, thick with night-blooming vines. I had once coaxed them to flower early for a festival. I had thought I was being generous. Now I whispered a different kind of request. Not command, not control, a plea. Hold me. The vines rose, subtle and careful, as if they understood the stakes. They thickened where my hands reached. They steadied my weight. I lowered myself, breath shaking, until my feet touched the soft earth of the garden bed. No alarm sounded. No shout rang out. The palace for a moment did not notice I had stepped out of my place. I moved quickly, staying close to hedges and stone walls, letting lantern light pass behind me. The token tugged again and again, leading me away from the bright paths toward the quieter edges. I crossed a narrow bridge over a pond where lilies floated like pale faces. The water reflected the moon and my own shadow, stretched and distorted. I kept expecting someone to call my name. No one did. At the far side of the gardens stood a greenhouse made of moonglass. It was usually locked, reserved for rare seedlings and the fragile plants that could not endure the open air. Tonight, its door stood slightly ajar, as if it had been left that way on purpose. The token warmed. I stepped inside. The air within was humid and fragrant. Leaves brushed my sleeves. Tiny blossoms glowed faintly along the walls, their light soft enough to hide in. I followed the pull past rows of silver ferns and sleeping orchids, until I reached the back of the greenhouse, where a curtain of hanging vines covered a narrow passage. My pulse thundered. I parted the vines and slipped through. Beyond was a small courtyard I had never seen, tucked behind the palace like a forgotten thought. A single archway of stone opened onto darkness. The forest waited beyond, its trees looming like patient witnesses. And under that archway, half in shadow, stood Rowan. He looked different without the ballroom light, less like a courtly roomer, more like someone shaped by the road. His cloak was damp, at the hem as if he had traveled through dew-heavy grass. His eyes lifted to mine, and for an instant the tension in my chest loosened, not because I trusted him, but because he was real. "You came," he said quietly. "I should not have," I replied, though my feet kept moving toward him anyway. Rowan's gaze flicked over me, checking for pursuit. "Did he lock you in?" "Yes," I admitted. My voice tasted like humiliation. He did not call it that, but yes. Rowan exhaled, controlled. "Then you have seen enough to understand why you cannot stay." I tightened my fingers around the token. I saw the source. His expression sharpened. "And you felt it respond." I nodded. It pulled at me like a tide. "He wants to use me at the binding." Rowan's jaw tensed. Use is too gentle a word for what he intends. I stared at him. "Then tell me. Do not speak in riddles like the rest of them." Rowan stepped closer, careful, as if he knew sudden movement might send me running back to my cage. "The king is not only renewing the wards, Serelya. He is anchoring them. Anchoring them to what?" I demanded. "To you," Rowan said. "To your Dawnweaving. If the wards are bound through you, then as long as you live, the realm remains safe. That is what the court will say. That is what they will celebrate." My stomach turned. "And what is the truth?" Rowan's eyes held mine. "The truth is that if the wards are anchored through you, the king controls the anchor. He controls the flow. He controls you. Your power will not just serve the realm. It will serve him forever." I took a step back, dizzy. That is not possible." Rowan's voice softened. "It is possible, because you care, because you have spent your life fixing what others break. He built his reign on that kindness." My throat burned. "Why do you care?" The question hung between us, sharp and exposed. Rowan's gaze dropped to my hand, to the token, then lifted again. "Because I have seen what happens to people who are called gifts. They are unwrapped, until there is nothing left. And because—" he hesitated, the first crack in his certainty, "because you deserve to choose your own life." My breath caught. The words landed like warmth in a cold room. Then he added, quieter, and the title of my story suddenly felt like a wound reopening. "But freedom has a cost, Serelya, and I need you to understand mine." My fingers clenched. "Say it." Rowan held out his hand, palm up. In the center lay a thin strip of bark, pale as bone, etched with the same simple mark as my token. "This is a binding sigil," he said. "It is the language the palace uses to make doors into walls and promises into chains. If you want to leave for good, we must break the tether the king has already woven around you." I stared at the strip of bark, my pulse roaring. "How?" Rowan's eyes flicked toward the palace, toward the hidden chamber beneath the crown roots. "We need a thread of dawnlight from the source itself, a small one, enough to unfasten what he has tied." "Steal from the source," I whispered. Rowan did not deny it. "Betrayal, if you call it that. Survival, if you tell the truth." My chest tightened until breathing hurt. "If I do this, he will know." "Yes," Rowan said. His voice did not soften. "He will know, and he will come." As if the forest heard those words, the air shifted. Somewhere behind me, in the direction of my chambers, a faint tremor ran through the night. Not an alarm bell, something older. The lanterns in the gardens dimmed all at once, as if a hand had passed over their flames. Rowan's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "He found your absence," Rowan murmured. My blood turned to ice. How? Rowan's gaze cut to me. Because you are not just a guest in his palace, Serelya. You are part of its magic. Then, faintly, carried on the night air like a whispered vow, I heard my name, not shouted, spoken. Serelya. The voice was King Aurelian's, calm and sure, as if he stood right behind my shoulder. Rowan grabbed my hand, firm but not painful. We have minutes, he said. Decide now. And in that moment, with the palace calling, me like a leash tightening, I realized the cruelest part was not choosing between the king and the stranger. It was choosing between the person I had been trained to be and the person I might become if I ran. Rowan pulled me toward the forest archway, and the token in my palm flared warm, as if agreeing. Behind us, the palace lights continued to dim, one by one, like eyes closing, and ahead, the dark trees waited, silent, as if they already knew what I was about to do. The forest swallowed us the moment we crossed the archway. One step, and the palace felt like a dream I had once been told to believe. The lantern light dimmed behind us. The air changed, cooler and sweeter, thick with moss and pine and the quiet breath of things that grew without anyone watching them. Rowan did not run in a frantic way. He moved with purpose, pulling me along a narrow path that seemed to appear only because he expected it to. My slippers sank into damp leaves. Branches brushed my hair. The token in my palm stayed warm, tugging like a tiny heartbeat that was not mine. Behind us, the palace did not shout for me. It called, Serelya. My name drifted through the trees, not carried by wind, but by something inside my own chest. The tether, the link, the invisible thread Aurelian had already tied around my life. I stumbled. My breath hitched. For a moment, the forest blurred, and the world tilted toward the palace like a compass needle snapping to north. Rowan caught my elbow instantly, steadying me without yanking. Do not answer it, he said, low and urgent. Do not turn your thoughts into a doorway. I pressed my free hand against my sternum as if I could hold my heart in place. It feels like he is inside me. Rowan's eyes flicked to my face, and for the first time I saw something raw there. Not fear for himself, fear for me. Because he is, Rowan said. Not fully, but enough. He has been weaving the tether for years. Every time you healed, every time you let the realm pull on you, he tied another knot. My throat burned. Then why did I never feel it before? You did, he replied softly. You just called it duty. The words hit harder than the king's voice. Serelya, Aurelian's call returned, calm as water. Come back. You are tired. You are confused. The night makes wild stories feel true. My knees almost buckled. Rowan put his palm against my back, not pushing, just anchoring. Look at me, he said. I forced my eyes to his. Rowan's gaze held steady, like a hand offered in a storm. Now listen to the forest, not the palace. I swallowed, shaking. I tried to do what he said. At first, all I heard was my pulse. Then, under that, the whisper of leaves, the distant trickle of water, the soft movement of unseen creatures, a world that did not demand I be useful to deserve air. The king's voice faded slightly, like a singer forced farther from the stage. Rowan exhaled, relieved. Good. Again. Keep choosing the forest. We moved deeper, away from any path I recognized. The trees here were older, their trunks thick and pale, bark patterned like faint silver script. The canopy above was so dense it felt like walking under a ceiling made of night. After a time, Rowan slowed. Ahead, the woods opened into a small clearing where the ground dipped into a natural bowl. In the center lay a pool, dark and still. The surface reflected the stars in sharp pinpoints, as if the sky had fallen and settled here. I felt it before Rowan spoke, the same thin edge of dawnlight I had felt in the hidden chamber, not as strong, but present, an echo, a memory of the source, lingering in the bones of the land. This place is called Starwell, Rowan said. Most courtiers do not know it exists. The old wardstones around it still hum. The first weavers used it as a resting point when the source was open. My voice came out hoarse. Can it help us? Rowan nodded once. If we cannot touch the source tonight without being caught, we take what the forest still remembers. A filament, a thread, enough to loosen the tether, enough to make you harder to track. I stared at the pool, uneasy. This still feels like stealing. Rowan's mouth tightened. I know. The silence between us filled with the title of my story like a bruise. Freedom for a betrayal. I looked up at him. Tell me the whole truth, Rowan. Not the version that makes this easier to swallow. He did not flinch from the question. Instead, he stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the trees might repeat it. I was in the palace once, he admitted. Not as a lord, not as a guest, as a runner, a quiet messenger who learned which corridors to avoid and which doors were never meant to open. My skin chilled. You served him. I served the court, Rowan corrected, but his eyes did not hide the guilt. I carried sealed letters. I listened. I saw the way the last Dawnweaver was praised until she began to look like a candle near its end. My breath caught. There was another? Rowan's jaw flexed. Her name was Elithra. They sang about her too. They called her the realm's blessing. Then one winter she simply stopped appearing in the halls. They told everyone she had gone to rest among the oldest trees, honored beyond measure. He held my gaze. I saw her once, by accident, in a quiet corridor. She was standing, but she looked empty, like someone had taken the color out of her and left only the shape. When she noticed me, she smiled and tried to speak. Nothing came out, not because she was mute, because there was nothing left to push the words into the air. My stomach turned. And you did nothing. Rowan's voice cracked, just slightly. I did not know how. I was small, afraid, and I hated myself for that. The king's voice returned, fainter now, but still insistent. Serelya, beloved, do not let strangers poison your mind. Come home. The word beloved made my throat tighten in a way I despised. Rowan looked toward the trees as if he could see the palace through them. I promised myself I would never let it happen again, he said. That is the truth. I promised freedom to you because I could not bear to watch another Dawnweaver be unmade. I studied him, searching for the hidden hook in his words. And the betrayal? I asked. Rowan's eyes returned to mine. The betrayal is that the king believes your power belongs to him. Breaking the tether proves. It does not. And yes, the court will call that treason. He paused, then added softer, as if it cost him to say it. But the forest will call it living. Something in my chest loosened and tightened at the same time. I took a slow breath and stepped toward the pool. Moonlight slid across the water. The surface did not ripple until I knelt and placed my fingertips just above it, not touching, only sensing. The pool responded. A faint glow rose from below, like dawn trying to remember itself. My palms warmed. The dawn-weaving inside me stirred, eager, familiar, hungry in a way that frightened me. Rowan crouched beside me, careful to give me space. Take only a thread, he murmured, not a flood. If you pull too hard, the tether will snap back like a whip, and he will feel it. The warning made my breath catch. I closed my eyes and did what I had always done, but for the first time, I did it for myself. I pictured a single strand of light, thin as hair. I pictured it lifting gently, like a spider's thread rising on morning air. Come to me, I whispered, just enough. The water brightened. A cool, clean sensation moved through my hands, up my arms, into my chest. Not pain, not pleasure, more like clarity. Like waking from a long sleep and realizing the room has been locked. A filament of pale light rose from the pool, so fine it almost vanished against the dark. It hovered between my fingers, trembling. My heart hammered. Rowan's voice was barely audible. Good. Now wrap it around your wrist, like a bracelet. Let it sit against your pulse. I did, slowly, afraid to breathe too hard. The filament settled around my skin, weightless and real. The moment it touched my pulse, the king's voice faltered. Serelya. It sounded less certain. I opened my eyes, stunned. Rowan exhaled, a sound that was almost relief and almost awe. He cannot hold you as tightly now. My fingers shook. Is it enough? For tonight, Rowan said. For tonight it buys us distance. Tomorrow we will need more if you want true freedom. We will need to unmake the tether at its origin. My stomach sank at the source. Rowan nodded once. Yes, the pool's glow began to fade, as if the forest had given what it could and was now drawing back into itself. And then, through the trees, a new sound traveled toward us. Not footsteps, not shouting. Music, faint at first, then clearer. A melody I knew from palace ceremonies, slow and beautiful, the kind that made crowds go quiet without knowing why. My blood ran cold. Rowan's head snapped up. That song is not for celebration, he whispered. That is a calling hymn. I rose quickly, the filament still wrapped around my wrist like a secret. The melody grew stronger, and with it, the air changed. The leaves trembled as if listening. The forest itself seemed to lean toward the sound, uncertain whether to resist or obey. Rowan grabbed my hand, and this time his grip was tighter. He is not sending guards, Rowan said, voice tight. He is sending the palace. And as the calling hymn threaded through the trees, I realized with sudden, terrifying clarity that Aurelian did not need chains of iron to bring me back. He had an entire realm trained to sing me home. The calling hymn slid through the trees like mist. It was not loud. That was the terrifying part. It did not need volume. It carried certainty, the way a lullaby carries childhood. The melody was slow and lovely, the kind of song that could make even grief feel polite. And the forest, ancient and listening, began to sway toward it as if the roots remembered the palace's authority. My wrist burned where the filament circled my pulse. It glowed faintly, like a thin line of dawn trying to hold its shape in a world determined to turn back into night. Rowan tightened his grip on my hand. Do not follow the song with your thoughts, he whispered. It is searching for you through longing, not footsteps. I tried to laugh, but it came out like a broken breath. I do not long for it. Rowan's eyes flicked to my face, sharp and gentle at once. You long for safety. He knows how to dress control in that color. The melody rose, and the air around us seemed to soften, as if the forest itself wanted to become a corridor back to the palace. Leaves trembled with a kind of obedience. Even the Starwell pool behind us reflected the music as faint ripples, like the water could not help but listen. Then my name threaded through the tune, not spoken this time, but sung, Serelya. My knees weakened, my mind filled with images I did not ask for. My chambers, warm and clean, the familiar cedar scent, the way servants lowered their eyes, careful not to burden me with their own thoughts, the promise of rest, the promise that I could stop making choices and simply be carried, a cage that felt like being held. The filament at my wrist flared, and the vision cracked. I gasped, suddenly furious that my own body could be bribed by comfort. Rowan stepped closer until his shoulder brushed mine. You can weave more than growth, he said. You can weave absence. I swallowed, confused. Absence? Silence, Rowan said. Not empty silence, but chosen silence, the kind that does not belong to him. The hymn continued, patient as tidewater. My hands shook. I have never done that. Rowan's voice stayed low, steady. You have. Every time you held a dying sapling and told it quietly to stop listening to the wind that wanted it to fall. My throat tightened. That was different. No, Rowan said softly. That was practice. The song swelled again, and the trees leaned farther, branches bending as if to point us home. I could feel the tether inside me tugging in time with the melody, a thread pulled tight by a singer who believed he owned the end of it. Rowan lifted my hand slightly, bringing my glowing wrist into my line of sight. Use the filament. It remembers. Dawn. Let it teach you what dawn does tonight. I stared at the pale ring around my wrist. Dawn did not fight darkness with force. It simply arrived, and darkness had to make room. I drew a slow breath and closed my eyes. In my mind, I pictured the calling hymn as a ribbon of sound, smooth and persuasive, threading between trunks, sliding under leaves. I pictured it searching for me, wrapping around my name, tightening like a gentle noose. Then I pictured something else. Not light, not fire, not anything loud or dramatic. I pictured hush, a velvet quiet that belonged to the forest before any palace was built. A quiet so old it did not need permission. A quiet that could hold a frightened heart without asking it to kneel. I lifted my hands, palms facing the air between Rowan and me, and I whispered, barely moving my lips. Not to the king, not to the court, to the trees. Hold our sound. The Dawnweaving stirred, unsure at first, as if it had never been allowed to shape itself into this form. Then the filament around my wrist warmed, and something answered. A thin veil seemed to settle around us. Not visible, but felt. The air thickened slightly, like stepping into deep moss. The world's edges softened. The calling hymn did not stop, but it slid past us. It moved through the clearing as if we were not there, as if we were only shadows. Between notes, Rowan exhaled a breath I felt in my bones. Good, he murmured. Keep it. Do not strain. Let it be natural. We moved, not running, but quick, careful steps through the undergrowth, staying inside the hush I had woven. The veil traveled with us like a cloak that did not touch my skin but made my heart feel less exposed. Still, every few breaths, the tether tugged. Aurelian was patient. He did not need to find my body if he could find my doubt. As we climbed a small rise, the trees thinned slightly, revealing a distant glow through the branches. Not lantern light, something paler. Rowan stopped behind a fallen trunk, crouching low. He pointed. Through the trees, I saw it. A ring of standing stones, half sunk into the earth, their surfaces carved with spiraling script that caught starlight like frost. My breath caught. Those are old ward stones. Rowan nodded. Older than the current court. They were placed when the source was still shared, before kings decided power should be private. If we reach them, the hymn will weaken. The palace cannot sing as loudly through old rules. We moved again, my hush cloak trembling at the edges as the song pressed closer. For a moment, the veil thinned, and I heard the hymn sharpen, as if it had sensed the gap. Serelya, the melody seemed to say without words. Beloved, return. My jaw clenched. I am not your beloved. Rowan glanced at me, and for the smallest moment his expression softened, like he was seeing the shape of my anger and approving it. Good, he whispered. That is yours. We crossed into the stone ring. The change was immediate. The air cooled. The calling hymn dulled. as if muffled by thick walls. The tether inside me loosened enough that I could breathe without feeling my ribs pulled toward the palace. I staggered, lightheaded with relief. Rowan steadied me again, and this time his hand lingered on my forearm. Not possessive, just present. "You are doing well," he said quietly. The kindness in his voice made something ache behind my eyes. I turned my face away so he would not see how close I was to unraveling. Then the ward stones hummed, not loudly, but with a deep note that vibrated through the ground. The carved script along the stones began to glow, faintly, one spiral at a time, like ancient ink remembering its purpose. Rowan's eyes widened. The stones recognized the filament. I looked down at my wrist. The dawn thread shone brighter, answering the hum. The hush cloak around us settled, stronger now, reinforced by the old magic. For a heartbeat, it felt like we were safe. Then a new sound arrived, not the hymn, footsteps, measured, unhurried. They did not crunch leaves. They did not snap twigs. They were too controlled for the forest. Rowan's head snapped toward the trees. His body went tense, like a bowstring pulled tight. No guards appeared, no torches. Instead, a voice entered the stone ring as if the stones had allowed it, smooth and intimate, as though the speaker stood beside me. "Serelya," King Aurelian said calmly, "you have always been so gifted at making things grow. Did you think you could grow a life outside my realm?" Without me noticing the soil shift, my skin went cold. Rowan's jaw clenched. He should not be able to speak through the stones. Aurelian's voice continued, gentle as a hand on a fevered brow. "Rowan has told you stories about cages, about being used, about a fate like Elithra's. He makes himself sound like mercy." My stomach tightened at the name. Then Aurelian said something that made my breath stop. "He did not tell you the other part, did he? That he cannot give you freedom unless you betray me in the only way that matters." Rowan's eyes flicked to mine, sharp with warning. Aurelian's voice smiled. "The source." The word landed like a blade made of light. No violence, no blood, just the sudden precision of truth. I stared at Rowan. "You said we would need a thread from the source to unmake the tether." Rowan did not deny it. His voice stayed low. "I did not want him to shape the truth before you could hold it yourself." Aurelian's voice slid in, patient and certain. "You see, Serelya, even your rescuer asks something of you. He asks you to steal dawnlight from the realm and hand it to him. He calls it survival. He calls it justice." A cold dread spread through my limbs. "Rowan, what do you do with it?" Rowan's gaze held mine, and in it I saw the weight of his choices. "I use it to break what the king has built around you," he said, "and to break what he has built around everyone." Aurelian's voice softened, almost sad. "He wants to unmake the anchor. He wants the wards to become wild again. Not to harm you, of course. He will insist his intentions are pure. But intentions do not hold borders, Serelya. Power does." My chest felt too tight for air. "Rowan, is that true?" Rowan took a step toward me, slow, careful, as if I might flinch. "The ward should not be a chain around a single woman's life," he said. "The source should not be hoarded like a crown jewel. The realm should not need you to be emptied to remain safe." Aurelian's voice cut in like silk. "And yet the realm is safe because of me, because I carry the burden of choosing stability over chaos. I could make you more than a conduit, Serelya. I could make you my queen." The word queen echoed in the stone ring, seductive and terrifying. "You would not be a vessel," Aurelian continued. "You would be revered, protected, free within the realm you helped save." Free within, I thought bitterly. Rowan's hand hovered near mine, not touching. "Serelya, he is offering you a prettier tether." My wrist burned with the filament's glow, caught between two truths that both demanded a price. The ward stones hummed louder, as if urging a decision. And somewhere beyond the trees, the calling hymn began again. Softer now, no, longer searching blindly. Now it was waiting. As if the forest, the palace, and the king himself were certain that eventually I would have to choose which promise to believe. The stone ring felt like a held breath. King Aurelian's voice lingered in the air, smooth as polished glass, as if he had placed his hand on the ward stones and claimed the right to speak through them. The calling hymn waited beyond the trees, not pressing, not searching, simply certain. I hated that certainty more than the song itself. Rowan stood a few steps from me, eyes fixed on my face like he was afraid I might disappear. His hand remained near mine without touching, a restraint that felt more respectful than any vow. My wrist glowed with the thin dawn filament, and the ward stones hummed in answer. Their light was not the palace's light. It did not flatter. It did not command. It simply existed, steady and old. Aurelian's voice returned, softer now, intimate. "Serelya, I will not shame you in front of the realm. Come back, and we will speak as equals. You will not be punished. You will be understood. Equals," I thought, like a bird, and the hand that closes around it. I took a slow breath and did something I had never dared to do inside the palace. I spoke my truth out loud. You locked my door, I said to the air. You called it rest. Silence answered. At first. Then Aurelian's voice, warm as a well-placed cloak. I protected you. The night before the binding is dangerous. Strangers move in it. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. I stared at the glow along the stones. You did not protect me from strangers, I said. You protected me from choices. Aurelian did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Choices are heavy. You have carried enough. The words could have been kindness if they were. Not a leash. I looked at Rowan, and my throat tightened. He wants me to believe that surrender is mercy, I said. Rowan's gaze did not waver. It is, when the person offering it is the one who built the cage. Aurelian sighed, and the sound was almost human. Serelya, the realm needs you. You know this. You feel it in the land. Do not let a man who knows nothing of ruling turn your compassion into recklessness. Rowan flinched, just slightly, at the word man, as if the king had chosen it to remind him he did not belong. I watched that small reaction, filed it away, and felt my anger shift into something sharper. Aurelian, I said quietly, you called me a key, a pause, like the king measuring how to answer without revealing too much. Yes, he said at last. A key that opens the realm's future, or a key that opens your control, I replied. The ward stones hummed louder, and I felt the dawn. Filament respond, brighter at my pulse. It was as if the forest itself approved of the question. Aurelian's voice cooled a fraction. I offered you a crown. You offered me a prettier tether, I said, and the words tasted like bloodless defiance. Rowan exhaled softly beside me. Not relief, respect. Aurelian did not snap. He did not threaten. He only said with gentle certainty, you cannot stay hidden forever. That thread on your wrist is temporary. Your bond to the source is not. Then his voice withdrew, not fading, but stepping back like a tide that knew it would return. The calling hymn beyond the trees began again, low and patient. I turned fully to Rowan. Now tell me, I said, everything. No clever omissions, no noble silence. Rowan's eyes searched my face as if he could see all the fractures forming behind my calm. Then he nodded once. All right, he said. Here is the part I did not want. Him to speak first. He crouched and placed his palm against one of the ward stones. The carved spiral under his hand glowed faintly, then steadied, as if deciding he was allowed. That alone unsettled me. These stones recognize you, I said. Rowan's mouth tightened. They recognize purpose, and they remember who built them. He looked up. My mother was one of the last free ward singers before the court made everything ceremonial. She believed the source should be shared in small ways, like rain is shared, not hoarded, not fed through one person until she breaks. My chest tightened. That is why you know about Elithra. Rowan nodded. I did not meet Elithra by accident. I was sent to deliver messages to her, orders dressed as poetry, encouragement that was really instruction. I saw her fading. I tried to speak to her. She could barely hold her own thoughts. When she looked at me, she looked through me, like I was already a memory. My throat burned. What happened to her? Rowan's eyes flicked away, pain passing through them like a shadow. The court said she went to rest among the oldest trees. That is what everyone repeats. The truth is quieter. She was moved into the root chambers and kept there, tended like a sacred candle until she went out. No blood, no spectacle, just the slow theft of a life. My fingers curled around the dawn, filament at my wrist. I felt suddenly nauseous. That is what he intends for me. Yes, Rowan said. And worse, he intends to make it sound like devotion. He will let the realm grieve you while thanking him for your sacrifice. A cold clarity settled in me. And the wards. If the anchor breaks, will the realm become unsafe? Rowan did not dodge the question this time. The wards would weaken if nothing replaces the anchor, he said. But they do not have. To be anchored through you. The old way used many small anchors, ward stones placed across the border, renewed by the source in measured threads. It takes work. It takes humility. It takes a king willing to share power. I almost laughed at the last line. Aurelian will never do that, I whispered. No, Rowan agreed. That is why he bound everything to a single miracle. One woman, one story. Easier to control. I stared at Rowan, weighing his truth against the king's. And then the title of my story rose between us again, sharp as a question. Freedom for a betrayal. If we take dawnlight from the source, I said slowly, we are stealing from the realm. Rowan's expression softened. We are borrowing what he has locked away, he said, and we are returning it differently. Not to me, not to some rebel cause, to the border stones, to the old network, to the realm itself. My pulse thudded. How? Rowan stood and pointed into the dark beyond the ring. There is an old passage under the crown roots, he said. Not the hidden chamber you saw. Older. It predates the palace. It was a root tunnel used by the first weavers to carry dawn threads to the wardstones. The entrance is sealed now, but not destroyed. I can find it. The thought of returning to the palace made my stomach tighten. I cannot step into that hall again, I said. He will feel it. Rowan reached toward my wrist, stopping short of touching. The filament gives you a veil, he said. Not perfect, but enough, if you keep your mind steady. The tether pulls hardest when you doubt yourself. The calling hymn shifted in the distance, drawing nearer. Rowan's eyes sharpened. We do not have much time. Once the palace realizes you are not coming back, it will send more than a song. It will send ceremony. It will send pleas. It will send Leora, with tearful eyes and familiar hands, and every part of you that craves safety will want to follow. I flinched at my attendant's name, because he was right. Leora had always been kind, and kindness had been my weakness. I turned back to the wardstones, letting their hum ground me. If we do this, I said, we do it with a promise. Rowan's brow furrowed. What promise? I lifted my glowing wrist so he could see it. You swear to me, Rowan, I said. Not to break the realm, not to use me as your key either. You swear that what we take from the source will be returned to the wardstones, spread across the border, not poured into anyone's hands. Rowan stared at me for a long moment. Then he stepped into the ring's center, placed his palm over his heart, and spoke with a simple steadiness that felt older than court language. I swear, Serelya, he said, by the forest that remembers names without crowns, by the dawn that belongs to no single hand. I will not trade your cage for mine. I will not take what is yours. We return the light to the land. The wardstones brightened, as if they had heard the vow and accepted it. My throat tightened with something dangerously close to hope. Then the calling hymn stopped, not fading, not retreating, stopping, as if a singer had lifted a hand and silenced the choir. In the sudden quiet, I heard something else. A soft rustle of leaves, a careful step at the edge of the clearing, a presence. Rowan's head snapped toward the trees. His hand went instinctively to the inside of his cloak, not drawing a weapon, just preparing for whatever he kept there. From the shadows, a familiar voice spoke, trembling but clear. Lady Serelya? Leora stepped into the starlight, her eyes wide, her hands clasped as if in prayer. She looked cold, as if she had run through the night without a cloak. Her gaze flicked to Rowan, then back to me, and her expression crumpled with something that looked like fear. Please, she whispered, come back. He is not angry. He is hurt. He says you are confused, and he asked me to find you because he knows you trust me. My heart sank. Not guards, not threats. The palace had sent my comfort, wearing a human face, and Leora's eyes, glossy with panic, told me one more terrifying truth. Either she truly believed she was saving me, or she was the gentlest chain Aurelian had ever forged. I took one step toward her and felt the tether inside my chest twitch, eager. Rowan's voice was barely a breath beside me. Serelya, choose carefully. This is how he brings you home without ever having to chase you. Leora looked like she had stepped out of my old life and into my new one by mistake. Her hair was half undone, strands stuck to her cheeks from cold sweat. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. She was not dressed for the forest. She was dressed for the palace, for quiet corridors and warm rugs and predictable rules. Seeing her here, under stars and old stones, made my chest ache in a way I did not expect. She took one step closer, then stopped as if an invisible line held her back. Lady Serelya, she whispered again. Please, he is waiting. He says you are frightened. He says you will regret this when the night passes. The way she said he, like it was a weather pattern no one argued with, made something in me harden. Rowan stayed beside me, silent. I could feel him watching Leora the way you watch a door that might open or slam shut. I forced myself to breathe slowly. The dawn filament around my wrist warmed, as if it sensed my pulse trying to leap out of my skin. Leora, I said gently, did he tell you to say those words? Her eyes flickered. Just once. Enough. He asked me to find you, she said. He asked because you trust me. And do you believe him? I asked. Do you believe I am only confused? Leora swallowed. Her gaze darted to the wardstones, to the faint glow around my wrist, to Rowan. She looked like someone trying to hold too many fragile things at once. I believe you are in danger, she said. That man is not who he claims. The king said he is a liar, a thief, someone who wants to break the realm. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. I stepped forward carefully, keeping my hands visible. Leora, look at me. Not at him. Me. Do I look like someone who is safe in the palace? Leora's eyes filled, and that was the moment I realized something that shook me. She did not look triumphant. She looked terrified. I tried to wake you, she whispered, when they sealed the door. I pressed my hand to the warding and begged it to open. It would not. My breath caught. You tried? Leora nodded once, misery trembling in her throat. I told myself it was for your rest. I told myself it was kindness, but I knew what it was. I knew. The forest went very quiet around us, as if listening to her confession. I took another slow step closer. Then why are you here? Leora's lips parted, but her voice faltered, as if it snagged on something inside her. She lifted a trembling hand to her collar, fingers fumbling as though she could not quite remember how to move. Then she pulled the fabric down just enough for me to see the skin beneath her throat. There, faint as a bruise under moonlight, was a mark. A spiral sigil, delicate and precise, like ivy drawn in invisible ink. My stomach dropped. Rowan inhaled sharply. A binding sigil. Leora flinched at his voice. He placed it when I was sworn in, she whispered. He said it was tradition, a protection. He said it would keep the palace from harming me. Her eyes squeezed shut. But it is not protection. It is a hook. I felt cold anger rise in me, clean and bright. Of course it was. The palace did not only bind miracles. It bound servants too. It bound kindness. It bound loyalty until it became obedience. I raised my glowing wrist slightly. The dawn filament pulsed as if responding to the sigil on Leora's skin. Leora, I said, voice soft but steady. Did he command you to bring me back? Tears spilled over her lashes. Yes, the word came out like it hurt. And can you disobey? I asked. She tried to speak, but her throat tightened, and she shook her head in a small, helpless motion. Rowan leaned closer to me. Careful. If the sigil is active, it will drag her will into alignment with his. Leora's breathing became shallow, panicked. I do not want to hurt you, she whispered. I do not want to be his hand. But when I think of turning away, it feels like my bones fill with cold, like my thoughts slip out of my grasp. My chest ached with a strange grief. I thought of Elithra, standing in a corridor, empty behind her eyes. Not dead, not injured, just unmade. I looked at Leora, and I made a decision that felt like stepping onto a bridge that might collapse. Hold still, I said. Leora stared at me, confused. Rowan's eyes widened slightly, as if he understood what I intended. I lifted my wrist toward Leora's throat, keeping distance at first, letting the filament's warmth spill into the air between us. It shimmered like the thinnest sunrise. I cannot remove it, I said quietly. Not tonight, not fully, but I can loosen it. Just enough for you to choose your next breath. Leora's lips trembled. Lady Serelya, if you do this, he will know. I know, I replied. Rowan's voice was low. Serelya, if you pull too hard, the tether will flare. He will feel it through both of you. I nodded once. Then I will not pull hard. I will weave gently. I closed my eyes and pictured the binding sigil on Leora's throat as a knot in a ribbon. Not a chain, a knot. Knots could be loosened. I let my Dawnweaving stir, careful, like hands working with fragile thread. The filament at my wrist warmed, and a soft glow spread into my fingertips. I reached forward and hovered my hand near Leora's throat without touching. Just for a moment, I whispered. Remember yourself. Leora gasped. A sharp inhale like someone coming up from underwater. Her shoulders shook. Then she blinked and stared at me as if she was seeing me clearly for the, first time tonight. She said, and her voice steadied just slightly. I can think. Rowan exhaled through his nose, relief tempered by tension. Good. It is loosened, not broken. It will tighten again if she panics, or if the king presses. Leora's eyes darted toward the trees, as if expecting Aurelian's voice to lash out. Instead, the silence remained, but it was the kind of silence that felt watched. I took Leora's hands in mine. They were freezing. Listen to me. I am not safe in the palace. He intends to use the source through me until there is nothing left. Do you understand? Leora's mouth parted, horror spreading across her face. No, he said you would be honored. He said you would be radiant. Radiant, I repeated, bitter, like a candle. Leora's eyes filled again. I did not know. You suspected, I corrected gently, and you still came, because the sigil forced you. That is not your shame. That is his. Leora swallowed hard. What are you going to do? I looked at Rowan, then back at her. We are going to the root tunnel, the old passage. We need to reach the source without letting him trap me again. Rowan says you might know servant ways into the crown roots. Leora froze. Fear flickered over her face, and I saw the sigil under her skin pulse faintly, as if reacting to the thought of disobedience. I can lead. You, she whispered. But if he calls, I do not know how long I can resist. Rowan's gaze softened, almost reluctantly. Then we move fast, and we keep her mind anchored. I nodded. We anchor ourselves together. Leora stared at me, and in her eyes I saw a question she was afraid to ask. Finally, she asked it anyway. If we do this, she whispered, and you escape, what happens to me? The truth rose like a stone in my throat. If you stay. Under his sigil, I said softly. He will tighten it. He will use you until you forget what you wanted, until your kindness becomes only his tool. Leora's face went pale. I squeezed her hands. "So you come with us. Not as my attendant, not as his messenger, as yourself." Leora's breath shook. Then she nodded, once, hard, as if striking a match inside her own fear. "All right," she said. "I will show you the way." We left the stone ring together, moving through the trees in a tight line. I kept the hush cloak around us, lighter now, but steady. The dawn filament pulsed at my wrist like a quiet promise. As we approached the palace edge, the glow of lanterns returned through the branches, and the air began to smell like polished cedar again. My stomach tightened. The tether inside me twitched, eager to be recognized. Leora stopped behind a hedge and pointed toward a narrow service gate half hidden by climbing vines. "That gate leads to the greenhouse corridor," she whispered. "From there, we can reach the crown roots without crossing the main halls." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "Will it be guarded?" "Not heavily," Leora said, voice tight. "The king prefers quiet control. He does not want the court to see panic." We slipped through the gate. The palace did not welcome me with cheers or alarms. It welcomed me with familiarity, which was worse. The corridor's stone floor felt like memory under my feet. The walls hummed faintly with wards that recognized my presence and tried to pull me inward, like a tide returning to shore. My wrist burned. I focused on the forest hush I had woven, on Rowan's steady breathing, on Leora's trembling courage. We reached a door tucked behind a hanging curtain of moss. Leora pushed it open, and cold air spilled out from below, smelling of earth and old roots. "This is it," she whispered. "The root tunnel entrance. It has been sealed for years. Only the king and the crown roots keepers know it exists." Rowan stepped forward, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. "If the passage still connects, it will lead close to the source chamber." My pulse roared. Then, from somewhere deep inside the palace, a single note sounded. Not the calling hymn, a bell, clear and gentle, the kind of bell that announced something sacred. Leora flinched. The sigil at her throat pulsed visibly now, brighter under her skin. Rowan's face went grim. "He is beginning the pre-binding rites early." My throat tightened, because he knows I am back inside the walls. The corridor seemed to dim, as if the palace itself leaned closer to listen. And then Aurelian's voice drifted down through the stone and root, calm and intimate, as if he stood right behind us. "Serelya," he said softly, "you came home after all." My hands shook as I stepped toward the sealed stairway, because I knew what came next. If we opened this passage, we would be walking straight toward the source, straight toward the tether's origin, straight toward the moment where freedom would require the betrayal the king had warned me about. And I could already feel the palace preparing to make my decision for me. The root tunnel was colder than I expected, as if the palace had been built on top of a winter that never ended. Stone steps descended into darkness, and the air smelled of damp earth and ancient sap. The walls were not carved cleanly. They were shaped by roots that had grown around the passage like ribs protecting a heart. Faint green light pulsed in the bark, slow and steady, and I could feel the palace listening through it. Leora went first, her hand on the wall, as if it might steady her thoughts. Rowan followed close behind her. I came last, keeping my wrist raised just enough to watch the dawn filament glow against my skin. Behind us, far above, the bell rang again, gentle and inevitable. Then the king's voice slid down the tunnel like silk. "Serelya, you do not need to do this. You do not need to frighten yourself with old passages and stranger vows. Come back, and I will forgive everything." Forgive, I thought, as if my freedom were a crime. I inhaled slowly, pulling the hush cloak around us like a second skin. The forest silence I had woven earlier felt thinner here, inside the palace's bones, but the wardstone's hum still clung to me, and the filament at my pulse kept me from drifting toward his call. Leora's shoulders jerked. I saw the sigil at her throat brighten under her skin, reacting to the voice. Rowan whispered, urgent, "Do not answer him. Keep walking." Leora's breath hitched. "I cannot stop hearing him," she murmured. "It is like my thoughts want to kneel." I reached forward and touched her shoulder lightly, just enough to remind her she was not alone. "You are here," I said. "You are choosing this step. Just this step." The sigil dimmed a fraction. Leora nodded, trembling, and kept moving. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, where the roots thickened into an archway shaped like a living door. The air changed, brighter, sharper, like the moment before sunrise. I knew we were close. Rowan stepped beside me, voice low. "The source chamber is beyond that arch. The tether will pull hardest there. He will feel you like a flame in the dark." My heart beat too fast. Then he added softer, "I meant what I swore. I will not trade your cage for mine." I looked at him, and for the first time since this began, I saw how exhausted he was from carrying his own guilt. He was not offering me a perfect story. He was offering me a chance to write my own. I nodded once. "Then we do it my way." Rowan's brows lifted slightly. "Your way?" I raised my glowing wrist. We do not steal dawnlight and run. We do not break the realm. We return the source to the land, spread across the border stones, the way it should have been, and we break every tether that depends on my obedience, Leora whispered. If you do that, he will lose control. Yes, I said, and that is the point. We stepped through the arch. The hidden chamber I had seen before felt small compared to what waited here. This room was older than the palace. The ceiling rose high, a hollow beneath the roots of the crown roots themselves, and the walls were layered with carvings, spirals upon spirals, as if generations had tried to write the same truth in different hands. In the center lay the pool, and above it hovered the ring of dawnlight, pale and precise, like the edge of a promise. The moment I saw it, the tether inside me tightened so hard my breath caught. My knees weakened, my mind filled with the king's warmth, the king's certainty, the king's voice telling me I belonged. Serelya, Aurelian said softly, there you are. He was not only a voice now. He stood at the far side of the chamber, half in shadow, as if the roots had decided to let him enter, but not fully welcome him. His circlet of ivy gleamed faintly. His expression was calm, almost tender, like a man watching a frightened creature corner itself. He took one slow step forward. You were never meant to face this alone. Come to me. Rowan moved slightly, as if to stand between us, but I lifted my hand to stop him, not because I trusted the king, because I needed him to see me. I stepped forward instead, toward the pool. Aurelian's eyes narrowed. Serelya, do not touch the source without me, without you, I whispered, and the words felt like dawn itself breaking. The ring of light brightened, responding to my voice, to my presence, to the filament at my wrist. Aurelian's calm cracked for the first time. Serelya, you do not understand what you are risking. I looked at him across the water. I understand more than you wanted me to. Then I turned my gaze to the source and spoke to it the way I had always spoken to wounded things, not with command, with honesty. I am not a vessel, I whispered. I am not a key. I am a person. The light trembled, and in that tremble I felt something like recognition. Behind me, Leora gasped softly. Rowan went very still. Aurelian's voice softened again, urgent now. Serelya, you are the realm's heart. The realm needs you. The realm needs choices, I said, voice steadier than I felt. It does not need a prisoner dressed as a savior. I knelt at the edge of the pool. The water was so clear I could see the roots below it, thick and white, like veins carrying life. The ring of dawnlight hovered just above my hands. I did not pull. I asked, give me a thread, I whispered. Not to hoard, not to hide, not to control, to return you to the land. The light brightened. A filament rose from the ring, finer than hair, trembling between my fingers. It felt alive, not in the way a creature is alive, but in the way a morning is alive. The tether inside me surged, panicked, as if it knew it was about to be undone. Aurelian's voice sharpened. Stop. You are mine. The word mine hit me like a slap. I did not turn around. I did not argue. I simply let the truth fill my lungs. No, I said softly. I never was. The filament in my hands warmed, and I felt the source answer, that truth like a door opening. I lifted my wrist, placing the new filament beside the one already circling my pulse. 2 threads of dawnlight, humming together like a quiet harmony. Then I did something I had never done. I wove, not a wound closed, not a flower coaxed open. I wove a promise into the air. I pictured the border stones, the old network Rowan had described, scattered like sleeping stars along the realm's edge. I pictured them, lighting one by one, not from a single anchor, but from a shared flow, a living web that did not depend on one woman's exhaustion. I let the filament stretch outward, and the chamber filled with a soft glow, as if dawn were rising inside stone. The roots above us hummed. Far away, I felt something awaken in the land, like a line of stones remembering their names. Aurelian's breath caught. What are you doing? Returning what you stole, I said, voice shaking with emotion I could no longer hide. Returning the realm to itself. The tether inside my chest began to loosen, not ripping, not snapping, but untying, knot by knot, like fingers finally releasing a grip. I gasped as warmth spread through my ribs, a sudden lightness so sharp it almost hurt. My thoughts felt clearer. My body felt like it belonged to me again. Leora cried out softly behind me. I looked back and saw her clutching her throat. The sigil under her skin flickered, then dimmed, as if the source itself had withdrawn permission for it to exist. Leora stared at me, stunned. I can breathe, she whispered. I can think without him. Rowan's eyes shone, the emotion in them raw and disbelieving. Serelya, he murmured, you are doing it. Aurelian stepped forward, and the roots creaked, resisting him. His face was still beautiful, but now that beauty looked like a mask. Slipping. You cannot undo a kingdom with a feeling. he said. I stood slowly, holding the filament like a sunrise in my hands. I am not undoing the realm, I said. I am undoing your claim over me. The ring of light above the pool pulsed, stronger now, not fading, not thinning. It was as if the source had been starving under hoarding, and sharing had fed it. Aurelian's voice lowered, dangerous in its gentleness. If you leave, Serelya, the court will call you traitor. Let them, I whispered. They called Elithra a blessing while they erased her. Their songs do not define truth. At the name Elithra, the chamber seemed to sigh, and for a heartbeat, I felt something like a memory brush the air. Not a ghost, not a voice, a presence of exhaustion and longing, as if someone had once stood here and wished for exactly this. I swallowed tears. I will not become a candle, I said. Not for a king, not for a story. Rowan stepped closer to my side, careful, not claiming me, only joining me. I am with you, he said quietly. Leora moved to my other side, still trembling, but upright. And so am I. Aurelian looked at the three of us, and for the first time I saw something human flicker behind his control. Fear, not fear of harm, fear of losing the world he had built around himself. He opened his mouth as if to speak again, but the roots above him tightened, not trapping, simply barring. The source did not lash out. It simply refused him. The calling him far above faltered, its melody unraveling into silence. I turned back to the pool and lowered the filaments gently into the light, letting them dissolve back into the source like threads returning to a spool. Then I exhaled and felt the tether inside me go still. Not gone forever, perhaps, but no longer tight, no longer his. We left the chamber the same way we entered, but the tunnel felt different now. The walls still hummed, but not with control, with life. When we emerged into the night air beyond the palace service gate, the forest greeted me like I had always belonged to it. The stars looked sharper. The wind felt like permission. Rowan walked beside me without touching, as if he understood that freedom meant space. Leora took a deep breath and laughed once, stunned by her own sound. I looked back at the palace, its lanterns glowing softly, no longer like eyes, just lights. I did not feel hatred. I felt grief for the years I had mistaken captivity for purpose. Rowan's voice was quiet beside me. Where will you go? I lifted my wrist and watched the last faint glow of dawnlight fade into my skin like a memory of sunrise. Somewhere that my choices matter, I said. Somewhere the realm is protected by many hands, not one. Chained heart. Rowan's gaze softened. And you? He asked, voice barely above the leaves. What do you want, Serelya? The question made my throat tighten. I thought of the woman I had been, the girl trained to be useful, the miracle praised until she forgot she was a person. Then I looked at Rowan, at Leora, at the forest that asked nothing but honesty. I want a life that is mine, I said, and I want to use my power without losing myself. Rowan nodded slowly, as if accepting the weight of that truth. Then we build it, he said. Together, if you choose. I did not give him a vow. I did not give him a cage-shaped promise. I simply reached out and let my fingers brush his, light as leaf touch. Yes, I whispered. I choose. And for the first time, the dawn inside me felt like hope instead of obligation.